I let her steal my boat because I wanted her to. That's right. I didn't just catch my HOA president trespassing, I invited her to. See, after 22 years in uniform surviving deserts, jungles, and bureaucrats with clipboards, all I wanted was silence. That's why I moved out here to a quiet lakeside cabin my late uncle left me. No rules, no committees, no approved mailbox colors. Just water, coffee, and peace. For 3 days I had exactly that. Then came her Skylar Campbell, queen of the HOA, sandals squeaking, clipboard clutched like a holy relic. She said the lake was community property. I said over my dock. She didn't take that well. And when she tried to steal my boat, she found out what happens when you pick a fight with a man who builds his own traps. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you've ever met a Skylar in your life, hit that subscribe button. This one's for you. The morning the war started, the lake looked innocent, steel blue water, a strip of fog barely grazing the surface, and loons calling each other like they owned the place. I had a mug in one hand, a pry bar in the other, and one warped dockboard under my knee. If peace had a sound, it was the soft tap of my hammer and the occasional crackle of pine needles in the sun. Then I heard it skirch, skirch. Sandals on gravel. I didn't look up at first. I've learned that some noises go away if you pretend you didn't hear them. Scroosh, scroosh came closer and then stopped. The air pressed down, expecting me to blink first. That's when the voice arrived, bright, cheerful, and hostile in the way only professional politeness can be hostile. "Good morning," the voice chimed. "I'm Skylar. Skylar Campbell with Lakeview Serenity." I set my hammer down deliberately. "With what exactly?" I asked without turning around. "The HOA," she said. And she gave it capital letters the way someone says, the FBI, or the Vatican. I stood and faced her. Blonde bob cut like a metronome, big sunglasses that could reflect a confession pastel blouse under a cardigan that probably had a legal team on retainer. In her hands, a thick clipboard with color-coded tabs, a pen on a curly string, and a laminated badge that said President in crisp block letters. Sandals. Rhinestones. Of course. "I'm Benjamin," I said. "Benjamin Reed. New neighbor." Her smile intensified, which was not encouraging. "Wonderful. We just love welcoming new homeowners to the community." "Lucky for you," I said, "I'm not in the community." Skylar's smile shortened by an inch. "Oh, the cabin. Right." She glanced over my shoulder at the dock, at the no trespassing sign newly bolted to the post, at the second sign that said, "Private property, this means you." The last 2 words were hand-painted. I have good penmanship when I'm irritated. She lifted the clipboard and clicked the pen. "So, Benjamin. Do you prefer Ben? Or Benjamin is fine," I said. "What can I do for you, miss?" "Campbell Skylar," she corrected in the tone of someone who doesn't really want to be on a first-name basis but insists on it to establish jurisdiction. "I'm here just to introduce myself and, get you up to speed on how we do things here at Lakeview Serenity." I looked around at the water, the forest, and the empty sky. Seems pretty self-explanatory. A brief laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Adorable. We have a culture of shared stewardship, Benjamin trash pickups, shoreline cleanups, community events, that sort of thing. Historically, this stretch of shoreline, she gestured at my dock like she was choosing entrees from a menu, has been used for small gatherings, barbecues, and sunset socials. Historically, I said, this stretch of shoreline belonged to my uncle, and now it belongs to me. No barbecues, no socials. She clicked the pen again. Of course, we're very respectful of boundaries. She said the word like she'd read it in a book about endangered species. But because you're adjacent to common spaces, there's an understanding that neighbors can access the lake here, provided they leave no trace. I pointed with my pry bar toward a crushed beer can in the weed bed and a damp pile of ashes in the ring I'd dismantled the day before. "Your understanding leaves a lot of traces. That might have been teens," she said. "Or guests. You know how that is. I do. Which is why I installed cameras and posted signs." I nodded to the small lens tucked into the pine trunk, the red LED politely blinking hello. Skylar's smile slid another inch. "Oh, cameras. That's proactive. I'm a proactive guy." "Well then," she said brightly, flipping a tab on the clipboard, "let's be proactive together. We have a weekend access schedule for watercraft launches to avoid dock congestion. I'll put you down for Tuesdays and Thursdays for personal use and Saturdays for community no." Skylar tilted her head. It made a soft feathering sound against the edge of her composure. "I'm sorry. No, you won't put me down for anything. I'm not part of Lakeview Serenity. This land isn't deeded to the HOA. I checked. Twice. Technically, she tasted the word. Technically, you're not. But this cove has always been treated as a communal shoreline. We like to think of your parcel as an honorary zone. Honorary zones don't exist, I said. Kind of like calorie-free donuts. I picked up the warped board and laid it across the joists. She watched me, nostrils flaring at the audacity of manual labor being prioritized over her schedule. The lake threw sunlight back at us in sheets. A loon laughed somewhere. It sounded personal. Look, Skylar said, softening her tone, by exactly 2 degrees, we're reasonable people. We want you to feel welcome. We do weddings here, baptisms, sunset potlucks, on your property, I said, not mine. Community spirit means sharing. Community spirit also means cleaning, I said. I picked up 12 beer cans and half a hot dog from under my deck yesterday. If that's your spirit, you need an exorcist. The pen stopped clicking. Her mouth made a thin white line. She checked the clipboard, then angled it so I couldn't see the page. Absolutely nothing on earth makes people more territorial than paper they brought to your house. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot, she said. How about this? Leave your gate open on weekends so everyone has lake access without walking the long way around. We'll even put a small donation box by the dock, I laughed. Couldn't help it. You want me to unlock my property so strangers can march through, and I get a tip jar for damages. It would really boost morale, Skylar said, eyebrows knitting like twin caterpillars. We've had a rough season with compliance. If new residents model participation, I'm not a new resident. I'm a private one. Her sunglasses flashed a perfect reflection of me, 6'2" weather-beaten t-shirt stained with sap, a pry bar that used to be a crow's favorite perch. She took a breath, probably counting to 10 in Roman numerals. Benjamin, she said, with infinite patience, that had an expiration date. No one wants to be difficult. But if you insist on closing off a historically accessible shoreline, it creates friction, complaints, meetings, citations. Not here it doesn't, I said. If someone climbs my fence, it creates a 911 call. She blinked. The sound was almost audible. Are you threatening legal action? I'm promising it. There's a difference. A black SUV crept along the road behind the tree line, another board member, perhaps doing reconnaissance from the climate-controlled safety of a leather seat. Skylar clocked it, but didn't wave. She was in a scene and didn't want to ruin the blocking. Okay, she said, brisk again, back to the bullet points. Let's talk compromises. Would you consider allowing access for scheduled events? We have a community wedding coming up. Cindy Howard's daughter. Congratulations to Cindy, I said. They can rent the Marina Pavilion 2 coves over like everyone else. Skylar pressed her lips together in a way that suggested Cindy Howard's daughter had never stood in line for anything. And baptism, she asked. It's a lake. It's tradition. My dock isn't a church, I said. And if it were, I'd be the pastor. Pastors don't let strangers rewire the altar because it has nice lighting. Wow, she said softly. Okay, I see. You're that type. What type is that? The type who thinks private property is a personality. She smiled again, glittering edges back on. We'll see about that. Skylar, I said, lowering the board and meeting her sunglasses dead on. If I walked into your backyard, set up a grill, and left beer cans in your pool skimmer, what would you call that? Something changed in her shoulders. A small retreat quickly covered. That would never happen. We have a gate. So do I said. 2, in fact. They'll be closed. She jotted something on her clipboard with the satisfaction of a person who likes to write the words she plans to weaponize later. We'll be in touch, she said, pivoted sharp military, and started up the path sandals, scraping a farewell that sounded like filing an appeal. Hey, Skylar, I called after her. She paused and looked back over her shoulder. The sun caught the edge of her lenses and turned them white as a lie. Your clipboard, I said. Does it have a tab for trespassing? The smile she gave me was all teeth and charity. Does yours have a tab for community goodwill? Right between don't litter and stay off my dock, I said. She left without another word. The SUV snuck away like a deer that had learned to parallel park. I stood there for a long minute, listening to the wake slap against the shore, the slow creak of the dock under my boots, the tick-tick of my cooling hammer. Then I went back to work. The board seated perfectly this time. Sometimes pressure helps. By noon, a brown HOA flyer had appeared under a rock near my mailbox. Welcome, new neighbor community guidelines you'll love. It read like a vacation brochure written by a parole officer. I tossed it into the burn barrel and watched it curl into ash. If peace had a smell, it was cedar smoke and hot coffee. That afternoon, while I replaced a shutter hinge and pretended I wasn't waiting for round 2, I started a notebook, Karen Surveillance Log, Vol. 1, Date Time Incident Outcome. I have found that if you document nonsense, nonsense becomes useful. 1410, HOA president attempted to schedule my doc for weddings. Outcome denial, elevated eyebrow. 1425, subtle threat of meetings, citations. Outcome reminder of gate, and 911. At 1730, I set two simple steel gates across the entry points, one at the road, one at the lakeside path that cut through the birches. Nothing dramatic, not a wall, just a physical sentence that said, full stop. I hung a little bell on the lakeside gate, not because I was whimsical, but because bells ring when someone forgets to read. As the light went copper and the wind came down off the ridge, I took my coffee to the end of the dock. The water mirrored the sky like it was trying to flatter it. A heron lifted itself out of the reeds in slow motion, one wing beat at a time, like a practiced bow to the evening. If tranquility were a drug, this was the dosage. That was when I decided two things. First, I wasn't moving, compromising, or negotiating my home into a public park because a woman with a laminated badge said honorary zone with her whole chest. Second, if Skylar wanted access so badly, I'd give her some on my terms. The plan didn't arrive all at once. It built itself out of memory and muscle, out of strange assignments in uglier countries, and the simple satisfaction of a well-laid snare that harms no one and proves everything. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need a shouting match on Facebook. I just needed patience, good logging, and a certain boat that didn't mind doing figure eights. But that comes later. For the moment, I sat on my dock and watched the last orange smear fade to velvet. Somewhere behind the tree line, sandals found gravel again, testing my new bell. It chimed once, clear, bright, inevitable. If peace had a warning, that was it. The next morning, the bell didn't ring. That should have made me happy. Instead, it felt suspicious, like silence right before a storm front moves in. By day 3, the bell chimed again. Once, twice, pause. I leaned out the window. There she was. Skylar Campbell, queen of the lakeside jungle, strolling down my gravel drive like she'd been summoned by divine HOA decree. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses on lips, pursed into the shape of good morning, but sounding more like compliance violation. Benjamin, she called cheerfully. Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. You are, I said, not moving. She laughed like that was adorable. Well, I'll make it quick. We're just having a community brainstorming session next week about improving our lakeshore harmony. We'd love for you to join. I kept sanding the window frame. Pretty sure I'm not on your mailing list. Skylar took 2 steps closer, heels crunching the gravel like punctuation marks. Oh, don't worry, I already added your address. You're part of the ecosystem now. Everyone around the lake contributes. I looked up. Contributes or gets milked, her smile flickered. Contributes, she repeated slower, as if teaching English to a raccoon. Anyway, I noticed you've installed new gates. Very fortress chic. I just wanted to remind you that blocking community access can lead to misunderstandings. Gates aren't walls, I said. They're sentences that end conversations. Skylar scribbled something on her clipboard, probably in a section labeled Future Lawsuits. Then she sniffed. You know, it would be such a shame if this lake lost its sense of unity. People used to come here for Sunday barbecues, for weddings, for trash disposal, I said. Don't forget that one. She blinked. The nerve twitched in her jaw. Benjamin, we're neighbors. Cooperation makes life easier. Why isolate yourself? Because I've met my neighbors, I said. Skylar's sunglasses tilted just enough for me to see her eyes bright, hard, and calculating. We'll see about that, she murmured. Again, that phrase was becoming her national anthem. When she left, I checked my security feed. She didn't head straight back to her SUV. She stopped by, the gate took photos, then crouched to read the sign like it was fine print in a surrender treaty. That night, I opened my notebook. Karen Surveillance Log Vol. 1. Entry number 2, 0940 attempted guilt-tripping relake access. Outcome sarcasm deployed successfully. Entry number 3, 1005 photographed gate. Outcome countermeasures pending. The next few days followed a rhythm. Morning coffee, quiet repair work, then the distant hum of HOA interference approaching like mosquitoes in coordinated formation. One afternoon, as I was painting the railing, a white SUV rolled up. Not Skylar's beige tank, but a sleeker model. Out stepped 2 women in matching polo shirts embroidered with Lakeview Serenity Volunteer Committee. Behind them, 2 identical chihuahuas barked like malfunctioning alarms. Good afternoon, the taller one called. We're here on behalf of President Campbell to discuss shoreline beautification. I thought she'd come herself, I said, lowering my brush. She's very busy, the shorter one said proudly. We're just collecting notes for next weekend's lake cleanup. We'll need full access to your dock for kayak staging. Not possible. They exchanged a look. The dogs yipped in protest. But the community voted I didn't. Sir, cooperation is mandatory, for I pointed to the sign again. Read the last 3 words. They squinted. This means, you, I nodded. Exactly. They retreated to their SUV in a flurry of offended whispers. 5 minutes later, I got a text from an unknown number. It would really help community morale if you left the gate unlocked for this event. S.C. I replied with a photo of my gate lock and the caption, morale remains secure. By the end of the week, Skylar was escalating. Flyers appeared in mailboxes around the neighborhood, help preserve our shared lake access. The photo showed my dock, my actual dock, with the caption, traditionally open to all. Traditionally, my patience was longer, not anymore. I printed a sign and mounted it directly above the dock stairs. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted, including clipboard carriers. The next day, Skylar returned, accompanied by her faithful lieutenants, the same women with matching visors, now joined by a man who looked like he ironed his jeans. They stood in formation like a suburban tribunal. Benjamin Schuyler said in her diplomat voice, "We need to talk about optics." Optics, yes. You've created an unwelcoming aesthetic. Those signs send a negative message. They send an accurate one. She took a deep breath. You're making this difficult. We could have been friends. I already have friends, I said. They don't come with bylaws. Her smile cracked for the first time. If you won't cooperate voluntarily, I'll have to file a formal notice of obstruction. I tilted my head. Obstruction of what community harmony? I don't think that's a felony yet. Skylar turned to her little counsel. See, this is what we're dealing with. The man muttered hostile vibes. I sipped my coffee and nodded. Correct assessment. Skylar looked back at me, eyes glinting behind her mirrored lenses. You'll regret this attitude, Benjamin. Only if you bring a boat, I said. The group left muttering and snapping photos of my property. One of the chihuahuas tried to pee on my mailbox post. I cleared my throat and the owner yanked it back like she'd touched an electric fence. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was worried, because I was interested. I'd spent half my life learning how people think before they strike. Skylar wasn't reckless. She was methodical. Every visit, every flyer, every neighborly request, it wasn't chaos, it was reconnaissance. She was testing boundaries, looking for the weakest gate, literal or psychological. So I decided to build something stronger than gates, something she couldn't out-talk, outvote, or out-guilt. Out on the dock, under the cold spill of moonlight, I looked at my boat Ghost, a matte black electric craft, quiet as a whisper, wired like a secure military terminal. It had started as a hobby project during my deployment years, a way to keep my hands busy and my mind sane. But in the right circumstances, it could become something else entirely. I crouched beside the hull, running my fingers along the polished fiberglass. You might get a visitor soon, girl, I murmured. Let's make sure she gets the full tour. The next morning, I installed a hidden sensor under the deck planks, linked it to the boat's ignition system. Then I tested loop mode, the function designed for intruders. When triggered without an authentication key, the boat would lock all controls and slowly cruise in figure eights across the lake until manually reset. Safe, controlled, embarrassing. I watched the test run from the dock. Ghost glided out, turned curved again, its silent motor slicing the reflections like a scalpel. Perfect. I couldn't stop smiling. The following afternoon, Skylar appeared again, this time pretending to jog. She stopped conveniently near my dock, breathing dramatically, as if she'd run a marathon instead of 50 yards. Lovely boat, she gasped. Is it new old project? I said, wiping grease off my hands. Built it myself. Impressive, she said already, stepping closer than she should. We used to have a community pontoon, you know. We'd host tours, sunset, cruises, even weddings. Maybe you could revive that tradition. I don't do passengers. Oh, come on. She leaned on the railing, tilting her head. You'd be the talk of the neighborhood. People love feeling included. Then they can buy their own boat. She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. You really don't understand how we do things here, do you? No, Skylar, I said, locking eyes. I understand perfectly. That's why I don't play. Her jaw tightened. You think you're special just because you have a fancy boat and a fence. No, I said. I think I'm safe because I do. For a moment, something ugly passed behind her sunglasses. A twitch, a glint of offense, turning into determination. Then she smiled again, that brittle HOA smile that promised retaliation hidden under layers of pastel civility. Well, she said, sweetly, enjoy your solitude. I do every day. When she left, I didn't watch her go. I was busy checking that the hidden camera above the dock was running. It was. Battery full, storage empty, ready. Because if Skylar Campbell wanted a fight, she'd get one. She just wouldn't know when it started. The thing about boundaries is people only notice them when they hit one. Up until then, they think the world is a buffet and your dock is the dessert table. So I made the boundaries impossible to miss. First came the gates, plain steel, waist-high, hinged into concrete footers I poured myself. No rustic charm, no Instagram aesthetic. These were verbs, not decorations. I welded a crossbar on each, and set padlocks that could probably survive a bear attack, and at least 3 HOA subcommittees. Next came motion lights that flicked on like stage cues, and a pair of small dome cameras tucked into the eaves where the swallows used to nest. I rerouted the old wiring, snaked a line into an encrypted recorder, and tied the whole system to my phone with silent push alerts. If my coffee steamed, I'd know. If a blade of grass thought about leaning over the property line, I'd know that too. By late afternoon, I'd hung a simple sign on each gate: stop, private property, ring bell, wait. And just below that, in smaller letters that carried the exact opposite energy, trespassers will be politely escorted off the premises by the sheriff's office. Repeated trespassers will be impolitely escorted. The bell was not decorative, brass shipgrade tuned sharp and clear. When it rang, the sound cracked down the birch lane and bounced across the cove. If peace had an alarm clock, this was it. The first ring came 20 minutes after I set the last screw. Ding. I wiped my hands, set down my driver, and walked to the lakeside gate. On the other side stood Skylar Campbell and 2 women I recognized from previous skirmishes, each wearing a visor that matched her pastel polo. The taller one had a clipboard, twin, lighter and thinner, like a junior license to meddle. The shorter one clutched 2 leashes, attached to 2 trembling chihuahuas, wearing sweaters, despite the June heat. "Good afternoon," Benjamin Schuyler sang, smiling with every tooth God and a cosmetic dentist gave her. "We noticed your new, installations." "Gates," I said. "Words have meanings." The taller woman lifted her chin. Debbie Miller, Volunteer Committee Chair. She said it like she expected a salute. The shorter one bobbed her head. "Carol Simmons, Hospitality." "I don't require hospitality," I said, "but thanks." Schuyler's sunglasses tilted. "We're concerned about the message these gates send. It's exclusionary." "Correct," I said. "They exclude trespassers. Efficient little devices." Debbie glanced at her clipboard. "You're adjacent to common shoreline, which by tradition is a rumor people repeat until it feels like a law," I said. "If you think your tradition is legally binding, bring me the deed. Highlight the part that says honorary zone." Carol tugged a leash as one of the dogs tried to squeeze under the bottom rail. "We're just trying to keep the community cohesive," she said. "We have a sunset potluck on the calendar. It would be helpful if you open this gate for kayak staging." "I'm allergic to helpful," I said, "especially the kind mailed to my yard without consent." Schuyler exhaled, finally letting the performance slip half an inch. "Benjamin, you're making this adversarial. We can resolve this without escalation." "I agree," I said. "Please leave." She blinked too slowly. "No one is threatening you. You're on my gate discussing what my dock will be used for. That's a threat to peace and a direct attack on my day." Debbie cleared her throat with parliamentary purpose. "President Campbell would like to propose a compromise. We schedule your dock for limited community access during specific windows. In exchange, we provide—" "No," I said. "A donation box for maintenance costs." And no. "A committee to ensure cleanup." No. Carol smiled weakly. "We can bring biodegradable plates. Bring them to the Marina Pavilion 2 coves over," I said. "Cindy Howard's daughter is allegedly getting married. I hear they have fairy lights." The chihuahuas yipped in scandalized unison. Schuyler leaned forward, voice quiet and chemicals sweet. "You moved into an established community, Benjamin. People expect continuity, cooperation. If you obstruct that, you'll force processes we'd all rather avoid." I tilted my head. "Schuyler, if I walk into your backyard and stage a barbecue because your grass looks communal, would you consider that continuity or criminal trespass?" "Apples and oranges," she snapped. "Property and property," I said. "Same fruit." A low thrum rolled up the lane, an idling SUV. A man in sunglasses and a navy ball cap sat behind the wheel and pretended he wasn't watching us. Schuyler didn't turn. She didn't have to. She knew her audience had arrived. "Last chance, Benjamin," she said, smile, reinstalled tone properly recorded for posterity. Will you agree in good faith to unlock these gates on weekends? No, even for scheduled baptisms, not unless the baptizer is also licensed in dock repair. Weddings, I don't host blackouts. Debbie scribbled furiously. Carol frowned as one Chihuahua sneezed. Schuyler straightened, pivoted into a pose that read, Chairwoman addresses resistance. Very well. We'll proceed through appropriate channels. I lifted the gate's bell cord and gave it a gentle tap. The bright note punctured the humid afternoon. Those channels, I said, should include reading the county map that shows my parcel is not in any universe yours. Her smile calcified. We'll see about that. She turned and marched away, entourage and tow dogs mincing through gravel like whispering typewriters. The SUV ghosted after them, and the lane sighed back into shade. I locked the gate and took a slow lap of the property. The cameras watched. The lights waited. Somewhere in the brush, a raccoon regarded me with professional curiosity, then carried on with whatever audit he was conducting. I considered naming him, then stopped. Naming things makes them feel like they belong, and I had enough belonging for one day. At dusk, an envelope appeared in my mailbox, unstamped Notice of Community Concern. It used serif fonts and centered text, and had the unmistakable perfume of someone who thinks formatting is power. The gist: my recent changes had impacted neighborly access and undermined the spirit of shared stewardship. It recommended I attend a productive conversation at the clubhouse on Saturday. I wrote "no thanks" across the notice, snapped a photo, and texted it to the unknown number I already knew was Schuyler's. Your notice arrived. Here's mine. Attached a polite letter I drafted 3 hours earlier and printed on plain paper. To whom it may concern, this property is privately owned and not subject to Lakeview Serenity HOA governance. Continued attempts to create or enforce unauthorized access will be documented and forwarded to the sheriff's office. Any person entering without permission will be considered a trespasser. Benjamin Reed. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. We'll handle this formally. S.C. Great. I love form. It stacks nicely in court. B.R. The week turned into a metronome. Day work, evening quiet. Night alerts, footsteps testing the gates, a flashlight beam skimming my sign, the bell ringing once, and then being apparently glared at into silence. I saved every clip, labeled each one with timestamps that would make a prosecutor weep with gratitude. On Thursday, while tightening a loose hinge on the boathouse, I caught movement at the edge of the birches. Not Schuyler. A man I didn't recognize, early 40s, starched polo phone out. He filmed the dock in slow, reverent pans like a nature documentary about rare habitats. When he reached the gate, he zoomed in on the lock, the hinges, the screws. He wasn't casing, he was cataloging. Can I help you? I called. He jolted and pasted on a smile that might have been practiced in a mirror. Oh, hi there. Beautiful morning. I'm Logan Pierce, Water Use Subcommittee. How many subcommittees does it take to change a light bulb around here? I asked. Just one, he said, not getting the joke. But it must file a memorandum. Here's mine, I said. Please leave. He left, but not before angling his phone over the top rail to snag a shot of the deck. I raised my own phone and took a photo of him taking a photo. Some exchanges are their own reward. That night, I sat on the dock with a single lantern and watched mosquitoes hesitate at the glow. On my phone, I opened the Ghost Control app, battery at 96% GPS, online geofence, armed loop mode, tested and ready. Not a weapon, a demonstration. A mirror held up to entitlement that would make entitlement dizzy. I could have called the sheriff then. I have a good practical relationship with the deputies. People who spend their lives stepping into other people's disasters tend to respect a man who keeps his own house in order. But there's an art to timing. If you call too early, the lesson never lands. If you call too late, you're cleaning up a mess you didn't need. So I set the hook and waited for the fish that thought it owned the lake. Friday morning, the bell rang twice. By the time I got to the gate, no one was there, just the trader routes of sneaker prints and a faint suggestion of perfume trying to conquer the smell of pine. A new flyer had been wedged under the latch. Community sunset, cruise reviving a Lakeview tradition. Stock photo of a pontoon boat. Date Sunday. Location Serenity Cove Dock. That was my dock's old nickname on their group page, apparently. It wouldn't be on the next draft. I took a Sharpie and added, AT the Marina in block letters, so big even a drone could read them. That evening, I heard tires on gravel and checked the front feed. Not an HOA SUV this time, county brown and gold. Deputy Mark Howard stepped out, hat tucked under his arm, face set in the blankness of a man who knows everyone's business and is determined not to show it. Evening, Mr. Reed, he said when I met him at the road gate. Deputy. Got a couple of calls, he said mildly. Concerns about access potential confrontations, you know how it goes. I do, I said. Got documentation you might like even more than I do. He smiled with his eyes. I'm sure. For now, just checking in. Everyone's staying civil as people can be while trying to conscript private property, I said. He nodded. Keep your logs. Call if anyone crosses the line. We shook hands. He left without inspecting the dock or the boat. Howard's a smart man. He knows the difference between a boundary and a trap, and that knowing it out loud is not always required. When the taillights disappeared, the cove fell quiet again. The moon rose fat and satisfied. Across the water, a single porch light clicked on in a beige house with perfect shingles and an HOA-approved soul. A silhouette moved behind the curtains. It looked suspiciously like a woman holding up a phone to film the night. She didn't retreat, I said to the water. She regrouped. And that was fine. I was regrouped too. The plan didn't start with revenge. It started with maintenance. That's what I told myself anyway as I sat cross-legged in the boathouse, surrounded by wires, toolboxes, and the faint metallic smell of lake water drying on aluminum. Ghost sat on her trailer like a panther waiting for release, matte black fiberglass, a clean sweep of engineering and obsession. She was my peace project, some guy's garden after retirement. I built something that could outrun it. Originally, Ghost was meant for quiet mornings, fishing, drifting, watching the fog lift from the far banks. But like every good machine, she had potential. The onboard computer I'd built from scratch had more processing power than my first deployment laptop. GPS lock, remote diagnostics, encrypted access. Then, after the first trespassing incident, I added something extra: loop mode. Loop mode was simple. If anyone started the engine without my authorization code, Ghost locked all manual controls, throttled to a safe cruising speed, and traced an endless figure-8 pattern until I reset it. It was an old-school containment drill disguised as nautical choreography. No danger, no crash, no escape. A lesson that lasted as long as the battery did. I hadn't used it yet, until Skylar Campbell made the shortlist. The next few days, the lake was quiet. Too quiet. No flyers, no committee patrols, no polite, just checking in. That only meant one thing: she was planning something. Skylar wasn't a quitter. She was a strategist. Every HOA president I'd ever met followed the same playbook: charm, pressure, paperwork escalation. When charm failed, she brought backup. When backup failed, she'd find a loophole. And when the loophole failed, that's when she'd get creative. So I decided to invite her creativity. On Thursday night, I cleaned Ghost from bow to stern. I buffed the hull until it shone under the single boathouse bulb, rechecked every seal, then installed a new motion sensor under the console, invisible, sensitive, tied straight to my phone. The GPS transponder pinged green. Camera feed armed. System ready. Friday morning, I parked my truck halfway down the road into town, left my gates slightly ajar, not wide open, just enough to whisper temptation. A real angler never yanks the line too soon. As I drove away, the cabin shrank in my rearview mirror, small, quiet, and innocent. The kind of place no one would ever expect could launch an ambush. 20 minutes into my drive, my phone buzzed once. Then again. Alert East Dock. Gate breach. Motion detected. Alert unauthorized access attempt. Ghost system. Alert ignition activated without code. Loop mode initiated. I smiled. Showtime. I pulled over by a gas station overlooking the lake and opened the live feed. The image loaded grainy at first, then sharpened, and there she was. Skylar Campbell. She'd ditched the cardigan for a hoodie, and jeans hair pulled back, clipboard nowhere in sight. She looked like a teenager trying to steal beer, glancing around every few seconds like she expected a camera, which, to be fair, she should have. Her hands shook as she reached the console. She pressed buttons, tugged the throttle. Then, with a triumphant grin, she hit the ignition. Ghost hummed to life. The electric motor purred low, almost gentle. The bow nosed forward, sliding off the dock. Skylar's smile widened, then froze. The wheel locked. She twisted. Nothing. She pressed buttons. The screen flashed red, access denied, auto-nav mode enabled. Ghost glided away from the dock, smooth and precise, then veered gently to the left, tracing its pre-programmed route. Loop mode had begun. I watched her mouth move, probably something HOA-themed. Like, this is unacceptable. She waved her hands, pointing at the dock as if the boat would apologize. Ghost, to her credit, ignored the orders. Then came the yelling. Her hair whipped in the wind as the boat curved, looped, turned again, a perfect figure-8 across the calm water. Around minute 3, she tried to stand. Bad idea. The deck rocked. She stumbled, barely caught herself on the railing. I took a sip of coffee and texted Deputy Mark Howard unauthorized use of private vessel in progress. I have live footage. Boat-safe intruder unharmed but trapped. Sending GPS coordinates. He responded within 30 seconds. Copy that. On our way. Don't intervene. No danger of that. I had the best seat in the house, a digital one. The next half hour was art. Ghost kept looping, slicing silver wakes through the water as Skylar spun like a disgruntled carousel operator. She shouted something toward the shore, but her voice barely carried across the distance. Her phone probably had no signal out there, the one thing I hadn't even needed to engineer. When the deputy's cruisers finally rolled up to my property, I drove back. By the time I reached the dock, the sun was painting the lake in orange streaks, and Ghost was on her 22nd lap. Deputy Howard met me by the gate. Evening, Ben. Evening, Mark. He looked at the boat, then back at me. She, doing okay out there. Depends how you define okay. He squinted. Motion sickness and pride issues, I said. Equal parts. Howard nodded slowly. She in danger. Nope. Auto-stabilized. Max speed 6 knots. She'll get bored before she drowns. The younger deputy beside him coughed to hide a laugh. All right, Howard said, pulling out his radio. We'll call the fire boat to escort her in when she's done spinning. Appreciate it, I said. I've got the footage if you want it. Oh, I'll want it, Howard said, half smiling. The DA's gonna frame it. We stood there for a while, the three of us watching Skylar circle the lake like a furious moon. Around minute 40, she sat down. Minute 45, she slumped. By minute 50, she looked ready to join the fish. When Ghost's battery dropped below 20%, the system automatically guided her back to the dock. The motor slowed, the bow aligned, and the boat coasted to a perfect stop, with a gentle bump against the rubber bumper. Skylar tried to stand, missed. Landed half in, half out of the boat, one sneaker in the water. Deputy Howard caught her by the arm before she face-planted. Ma'am, he said in the calm tone of someone explaining gravity to a toddler you're trespassing. I was ensuring community safety, she croaked, clutching the railing. That man's vessel was blocking access. Howard looked at me. I shrugged. She blocked it better than I ever could. The medic checked her over. No injuries, just nausea and a deeply bruised ego. Howard turned back to me. You sure you don't want to press charges? Not yet, I said. She's learned more in one loop than a courtroom could teach. Still, we'll take statements. I handed him my phone, showing the alerts and timestamps. Then I scrolled through the video, Skylar sneaking in, fumbling at the controls the exact moment Ghost rolled out to sea. Howard let out a low whistle. You know, he said, I've seen drunk boaters, runaway jet skis, even one guy who launched a pontoon with his truck still attached. But this? He chuckled. This is art. Performance art, I said. As they escorted Skylar toward the ambulance, she turned to glare at me, eyes bloodshot, lips trembling. You'll regret this, she hissed. I doubt it, I said. Abuse of technology, endangerment, I'll sue. Get in line, I said. It's a long one. She was loaded into the back of the ambulance, still shouting about bylaws and boating ordinances as the doors closed. Howard handed back my phone. Well, Ben, I think that's a wrap. Appreciate it, Mark. He tipped his hat. Next time, maybe set the loop to figure 9, just to keep things fresh. I laughed for the first time in days. I'll consider it. As the sirens faded up the road, I sat on the edge of the dock. Ghost's hull dripped silver threads into the lake. I reached out, patted the smooth fiberglass. Good girl, I said quietly. Mission complete. The sky dimmed, and for the first time in weeks, the water was perfectly still. No clipboards, no flyers, no HOA sermons about community spirit, just the quiet hum of evening and the faint ring of victory that only silence can make. For a soldier turned hermit, it was better than a medal. But I should have known better. In HOA, war's peace never lasts long. By the next morning, the whole lake knew. The HOA grapevine works faster than Wi-Fi. By breakfast time, I'd already spotted 2 paddleboarders floating a little too close to my dock, pretending to stretch while sneakily filming the crime scene. By noon, a post titled Shocking Abuse of Power by Reclusive Cabin Owner hit the Lakeview Serenity Facebook page. It had one blurry screenshot of Skylar half collapsed on my deck hair plastered to her forehead like seaweed, and a caption that said, "This is what happens when neighbors weaponize technology." It had 43 likes, 19 angry reacts, and 1 laughing emoji from Deputy Howard. I screenshotted that one for later. The comment section read like scripture from the Book of Karen. He could have killed her. Typical ex-military aggression. That man has cameras everywhere, it's giving Big Brother. Maybe if she'd stayed off the boat. That last one was from Cheryl Bennett, one of the quieter HOA board members. I remembered her. She was the only one who'd actually said hello when I moved in. Her comment had 68 likes before it mysteriously vanished an hour later. Skylar, it seemed, had started damage control. By that evening, her beige SUV was back in her driveway, headlights glaring across the water like searchlights. I sat on my porch, beer in hand, listening to the chorus of crickets and the faint whir of my camera feed syncing. Ghost rested peacefully at her moor, recharging. Her hull still carried faint scrape marks from Skylar's panic grip like war paint. I wasn't mad. I was curious. People like Skylar never stop at embarrassment. They escalate. And I was right. At 8:43 p.m., I got an email from a law office, Mitchell Green and Associates. The subject line, notice of pending civil action. Of course, 3 days later, I was sitting in a beige conference room at the county mediation office. The table was large enough for peace talks between rival nations, but the energy was pure PTA meeting. Skylar sat on the far end, hair, perfectly curled, sunglasses, indoors, sipping from a metal water bottle like it contained holy water. Beside her was a young man in a shiny navy suit and too much cologne, Mitchell Green himself. He looked like he'd lost a bet with a hair gel commercial. Across from them sat me and my lawyer, Donna Carter, mid-40s, steady eyes, voice like a clean cut of steel. Former JAG officer. When I'd shown her the footage, she didn't say, "You're screwed," or "This is insane." She just said, "We're going to enjoy this." The mediator, a woman who'd probably seen worse than both world wars, cleared her throat. "All right, Miss Campbell, Mr. Green, would you like to start?" Mitchell smiled with the confidence of a man who'd practiced it in the mirror. "Certainly. My client, Miss Campbell, experienced severe distress due to Mr. Reed's reckless use of a dangerous device, namely a motorized boat equipped with unauthorized remote systems capable of trapping individuals." Donna leaned forward. "Unauthorized by whom?" "By common sense," Mitchell said. Donna's eyebrow twitched upward. "Not a statute I'm familiar with." Skylar shifted dramatically. "He humiliated me. He lured me. That boat was left unattended, unsecured, like an invitation to the community. I was simply checking for safety hazards." I took a slow sip of my coffee and then decided to steal it. Her sunglasses turned in my direction. "Operate it," she corrected. "Without permission. I thought it was community property." "Funny," Donna said, flipping open a folder thick enough to stun a bear. "Because 2 weeks ago you told him, and this is your voice on video. Technically it's not part of the HOA, but we treat it like one." Skylar froze. Mitchell cleared his throat. "That statement was, taken out of context." Donna smiled like a predator stretching. "Oh, there's context. I've got the whole conversation here." She slid a USB drive across the table, time-stamped, with corresponding GPS data showing Miss Campbell entering my client's private property 36 minutes later. Mitchell hesitated. "We're not disputing her presence. We're disputing intent." "Intent to what? Float in circles?" I asked. Skylar's lips pressed thin. "He trapped me. That boat locked me in. I was helpless." Donna leaned back. Helpless enough to spend 43 minutes screaming at a machine while refusing to press the large red stop button labeled Emergency Dock Return. Silence. The mediator coughed delicately. Mitchell regrouped. "The issue, Your Honor." "Not a judge," the mediator interrupted. "The mediator," he corrected, forcing a smile, "is that Mr. Reed intentionally designed a dangerous device and used it to inflict emotional harm." Donna opened her second folder. "This is the owner's manual for Ghost. Every safety protocol documented every feature within Coast Guard compliance. She even had a life jacket onboard, size medium." "I believe that fits, Miss Campbell." Skylar flinched. Donna wasn't done. She produced more documents, the county parcel map showing my property line outside the HOA boundary, my purchase deed, the sheriff's incident report, and the pièce de résistance, a printed transcript of the HOA bylaws. Section 4, subsection B, Donna read aloud, states that the HOA's jurisdiction applies only to lots explicitly registered within Lakeview Serenity. Lot 91, Benjamin Reed's property, is listed as independent non-HOA land, meaning you have about as much authority there as over the moon. Mitchell tried to object, but had nothing. Donna leaned forward, voice calm. "My client has tolerated repeated trespassing, harassment, and attempted use of private assets. The fact that he responded with a non-lethal automated deterrent instead of, say, a police report for theft should be considered generosity." The mediator nodded slowly. "So, Mr. Green, are you maintaining your complaint?" Mitchell glanced at Skylar. She stared back, jaw trembling, then whispered, "Yes." Very well, Donna said sweetly. Then we'll be seeking counterclaims for trespass, attempted theft, and defamation based on the HOA's social media post. Skylar blinked. You can't prove that was me. Donna tapped her folder. Metadata says otherwise. Uploaded from your phone using your personal hotspot. The internet never lies, Miss Campbell. Even the mediator smiled a little at that. By the time we left the room, Skylar looked like someone had unplugged her from the wall. Mitchell muttered something about reviewing options, which was lawyer speak for we're doomed but too proud to admit it. Outside, Donna put on her sunglasses and grinned. You make enemies the way other men make coffee. Efficiently. Old habit, I said. Thanks for handling that. Don't thank me yet, she said. People like her. They don't surrender. They self-destruct. Keep your cameras rolling. She was right. A week later, the county court dismissed Skylar's lawsuit with prejudice, meaning she couldn't file it again. The verdict landed like a thunderclap on the HOA page. Cheryl Bennett posted a single comment. Justice takes a boat ride. It lasted 15 minutes before vanishing, but screenshots lived forever. Then came the real storm. Within days, an anonymous letter circulated among HOA members listing every incident Skylar had caused over the past 3 years, trying to reassign a disabled parking space to her yoga instructor, taking a neighbor's lawnmower for community, use and spending HOA funds on decorative clipboard holders. I didn't write it. I didn't have to. By Friday, a petition appeared, remove Skylar Campbell as HOA president. It passed unanimously. When I got my copy in the mail, it came stapled to a note in neat handwriting. Dear Mr. Reed, while the HOA does not condone theft or trespassing, we sincerely thank you for doing what none of us had the courage to do. Enjoy your peace. Cheryl Bennett. I pinned it to my fridge. Across the lake, Skylar's house went dark for 3 straight nights. Then a for sale sign appeared in the yard. Within 48 hours, she was gone. No announcement, no goodbye post, just a silence so heavy it made the whole lake feel lighter. I stood on my dock that evening, watching ghosts drift under the orange glow of sunset. The water lapped gently against the hull, rhythmic calm, unbothered. For the first time in months, there was no clipboard glinting through the trees. Peace. Real peace. And I had earned every second of it. You'd think that after being escorted off my dock by law enforcement spinning for nearly an hour, like a malfunctioning carousel, and losing her title as HOA president Skylar Campbell, would have done what most people do after humiliation. Retreat, regroup, maybe start a wellness blog. But Skylar wasn't most people. She was a bureaucratic terminator wrapped in beige polyester, a creature who lived off drama the way fish lived off water. So when the sheriff's office called to let me know she'd filed a second complaint, this time alleging systematic harassment and emotional distress, I nearly spit out my coffee. Let me guess, I said to Deputy Howard over the phone. She's claiming my trees looked at her wrong. Howard chuckled. Close. Says your cameras follow her car. Well, they point in that direction, I admitted, because that's where the road is. She says that's psychological intimidation. Tell her it's optical coincidence, Howard sighed. Just keep your paperwork, Ben. She's flailing, but she's flailing loudly. I thanked him and hung up, then looked out at the lake, calm, reflective, unaware of the storm brewing on land. Ghost floated silently in her berth, the model of serenity. I wish I could have said the same for the HOA board. A week later, an official notice arrived, Campbell versus Reed civil hearing scheduled. She'd actually gone through with it. The courtroom was small, the kind designed for traffic violations and domestic spats, not full-blown HOA warfare. Yet somehow, Skylar managed to turn it into theater. She arrived early wearing a dove-gray blazer, pearls, and her signature sunglasses indoors again. Her new lawyer wasn't Mitchell Green, rumor had it he'd jumped ship after the last embarrassment, but a woman named Patricia Horn, sharp-suited and equally sharp-tongued. Donna Carter and I walked in 5 minutes before the hearing. She carried only one folder, thin, calm, and confident. I carried coffee, always coffee. When Skylar saw me, she gave a tight smile. Enjoying your 15 minutes, trying to stretch it to 20, I said. Patricia rose. Mr. Reed, my client is deeply traumatized by your reckless actions, Donna interrupted. Save it for the judge counselor. He's not in yet. Patricia bristled. Skylar whispered something in her ear. Donna leaned toward me. She's gonna overplay this. Watch. She was right. When the judge entered, a gray-haired man named Judge Halbrook, with the patience of a glacier, Skylar launched into her opening statement like a martyr auditioning for sainthood. Your Honor, I was simply ensuring the safety and accessibility of our community when Mr. Reed's weaponized boat entrapped me on the lake. I was terrified, dizzy. I could have drowned. Halbrook adjusted his glasses. Was there any water in the boat, Miss Campbell? She hesitated. No, but the possibility. Did the defendant at any point threaten you physically or verbally? No, but he engineered a trap. Halbrook sighed. Continue. She did for 20 straight minutes. Words like trauma, intimidation, and technological ambush flew across the courtroom like confetti. Patricia nodded solemnly at each one, occasionally shooting me a glare so intense it could have been entered as evidence. When it was finally Donna's turn, she stood, walked to the podium, and pressed play on a small tablet. The courtroom speakers came alive with crystal-clear audio. Access denied. Auto-nav mode enabled. Skylar's voice. What no, stop. Stop turning. Boat system. Automated safety protocol active. Skylar. You stupid machine. I'm the president. Laughter rippled through the room before the judge banged his gavel. Donna let it play 15 more seconds, enough to show Skylar waving her arms like a conductor, having a meltdown before pausing it. Your Honor, Donna said, as you can hear, my client did not endanger Miss Campbell. In fact, the system clearly states it's an automated safety feature. She wasn't trapped, she was protected from herself. Patricia shot up. Objection dramatization overruled, the judge said, not looking up. Continue. Donna nodded and handed him a document. These are the GPS logs showing the boat's path, speed, and automatic return sequence, all within legal safety limits. We also have security footage of Miss Campbell entering my client's dock without consent. The judge scanned the paperwork, expression neutral. Miss Campbell, were you invited onto the defendant's property? Skylar stammered. I was acting in the interest of the community. Answer the question. No. And did you attempt to operate his boat? Yes, but thank you. You may sit. Donna's final blow came quietly. She opened her thin folder and withdrew a single printed sheet, a screenshot of Skylar's deleted Facebook post with the caption, "This is what happens when neighbors weaponize technology." Your Honor, Donna said smoothly, this post was uploaded from Miss Campbell's account and circulated throughout the HOA. It has since been deleted, but the damage was done. My client was portrayed as a violent recluse. The sheriff's office even had to field nuisance calls about him. That's defamation. The judge looked at Skylar over the rim of his glasses. You wrote this, Skylar's voice dropped to a whisper. It was emotional. Most things are, Miss Campbell, he said dryly, but emotions don't override property law. He tapped the gavel once. Case dismissed with prejudice. Miss Campbell, you are to remove all posts and issue a public retraction within 72 hours. Mr. Reed, you're free to go. Bang. Done. Skylar's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for oxygen. Patricia packed up in silence, already mentally sending her bill. Donna leaned over and whispered, "That was fun. Let's do it again sometime." I grinned. Next time, I'll bring popcorn. Outside the courthouse, reporters weren't waiting, just 3 HOA board members clutching folders like shields. One of them was Cheryl Bennett. She caught my eye and smiled faintly. Guess she didn't make it easy on herself, she said. She never does. She's finished, Cheryl said. The board's voting tonight. It's unanimous. By the next morning, the results were official. Skylar Campbell removed as HOA president, effective immediately. The news spread like wildfire. I didn't celebrate, not really. I just brewed another pot of coffee, took Ghost out for a quiet drift, and watched the neighborhood from a comfortable distance. A few days later, a new post appeared on the community page. This one, from Cheryl, effective immediately. Lakeview Serenity HOA will respect all private property boundaries. Let's rebuild trust and maybe not steal boats. It had over 100 likes, mostly laughing emojis. But the real comedy arrived that weekend. I was sitting on my porch polishing a fishing reel when I saw Skylar's beige SUV roll down the road, one last time stuffed with boxes, a small ficus tree, and what looked suspiciously like her clipboard wedged in the passenger seat. She didn't look over, didn't wave, just drove past, windows up, like the world was too loud for her now. Behind her car, a realtor sign flapped in the breeze. For sale, Lakeview Serenity, Lot 12. And just like that, the lake was quiet again. 2 days later, a letter arrived, handwritten, elegant, cursive, Dear Mr. Reed. While the HOA cannot officially condone your boat incident, many of us secretly applauded it. You reminded us that rules without respect are just noise. Enjoy the peace you've earned. CB. I pinned it on my fridge beside my fishing permit. That evening, I took Ghost out for her first real ride since the chaos. The sun dipped low, painting the lake in molten gold. As the motor hummed beneath me, I caught my reflection in the still water, older, sure, but lighter, like I'd finally peeled off a layer of tension I didn't know I was carrying. I'd fought wars before, but this one, the suburban kind, fought with bylaws and clipboards, had been the strangest of them all, and somehow the most satisfying. As I steered Ghost toward the horizon, I couldn't help but whisper to the empty water loop mode complete. For the first time in months, the lake sounded like itself again. No shouting, no sandals on gravel, no endless clicking of clipboards. Just the hush of ripples against the dock and the low hum of Ghost's charging port. I didn't realize how much tension I'd been carrying until it was gone. Every morning now started the same way: coffee in one hand, fishing line in the other. A stretch of mirror-like water ahead that didn't belong to anyone but me and the fish who hadn't learned better. Skylar Campbell had officially left the neighborhood, her beige SUV, her flower pots, her laminated bylaws all gone. In her place, a for sale sign stood like a gravestone to hubris. The rumor mill said she'd moved to her sister's condo 2 counties over, swearing she'd never live near water again. The irony didn't escape me. A week after her departure, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was precise and elegant cursive, so neat it could have been from another century. Inside was a folded letter and a printout of the HOA's new charter update. Dear Mr. Read, on behalf of the remaining board members of the Lakeview Serenity HOA, I want to personally thank you for, well, let's call it your public service. You did what none of us could. We've amended our charter to reaffirm property boundaries and personal privacy. I hope the lake feels like home again. Sincerely, Cheryl Bennett. At the bottom, she'd drawn a little smiley face. That somehow made it funnier than any thank you speech could have been. I pinned it to the fridge beside my Karen surveillance log, Volume 1. Maybe someday I'd auction that log to Netflix. By late September, the trees had started to burn gold around the edges. The mornings came in cool and smelled of pine and wet earth. I'd gotten used to peace, which was dangerous in its own way. You start thinking the war is over, that the world's learned its lesson. That's when Dennis arrived. Dennis was a raccoon. Or maybe the raccoon. He just started showing up around dusk, waddling out of the woods like he owned partial shares in the property. At first, I tried to chase him off, waving a flashlight and shouting. He looked at me like I was interrupting a staff meeting. The next night he came back, this time dragging a plastic wrapper from my trash can. I swear he was smirking. Eventually I gave up. He didn't cause trouble. He didn't file complaints. He didn't suggest community potlucks. He just rooted through my leftovers and left muddy paw prints on the dock. I could live with that. So I named him Dennis. It took me a while to stop expecting Skylar's perfume on the wind or the crunch of her tires on the road. But as the weeks rolled by, those echoes faded. The HOA, newly humbled, stayed in its lane. Cheryl sent an occasional email with meeting notes, each one shorter and more apologetic than the last. The subject lines read like a collective apology, friendly reminder, no trespassing and respecting property rights, our new policy. Imagine that progress by embarrassment. One afternoon, while replacing a loose plank on the dock, I found Skylar's old folding chair, half buried in reeds. Rusted algae-stained legs twisted from too many summers of ownership. I pulled it out, hosed it off, and leaned it against the boathouse. A trophy. By October, I'd upgraded the security system again. Not because I needed to, but because habit is hard to break. The new setup linked all the cameras, motion sensors, and gate locks to one master console. Ghost now had facial recognition, which was both convenient and petty. If the system ever detected Skylar's face again, it would automatically trigger a voice alert through the dock speaker: unauthorized user detected. Please consult your therapist. Not that she'd ever return, but it made me smile just knowing it existed. That same week, I invited Deputy Howard over for a beer. He pulled up in his county cruiser boots, dusty grin easy. So he said, leaning against the railing, heard the queen bee finally buzzed off. Far and fast, I said. Probably started a new hive somewhere. He chuckled. You know, we still get calls from other HOA presidents asking what exactly happened out here. My report just says, loop mode educational demonstration. Accurate enough. He raised his bottle, to peace with teeth. I clinked his bottle, and silence with sensors. That night, I sat on the porch with Ghost's charging light glowing faintly blue behind me. Dennis rustled in the trash, and an owl called from the woods. The lake shimmered silver under the moon, smooth as glass. For the first time since I moved in, it finally felt like home. I thought back to the day I'd arrived, the burnt coffee, the creaking dock, the hopeful belief that peace could last without effort. I'd been wrong about that part. Peace doesn't last by accident. It lasts because you defend it. And sometimes defending it means building a boat that bites back. The winter passed quietly. Snow draped the pines, the lake froze to glass, and I spent evenings by the wood stove tinkering with Ghost System or reading old field manuals out of nostalgia. Every now and then I'd receive a postcard, sometimes from Cheryl, sometimes from neighbors. I barely knew simple notes like, "Thanks for standing your ground. Lake's quieter now. Feels safer." We still laugh about loop mode. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd become a local folk hero for trapping an HOA president on a boat, I'd have laughed. Yet somehow that's exactly what happened. By spring, even the raccoon had mellowed into routine. Dennis would climb the porch steps every other evening, tap his paw on the railing like a doorbell, and wait for a scrap of jerky. When I didn't oblige, he'd steal it himself. He reminded me of Skylar, sometimes persistent, entitled, but smarter. Dennis never tried to own the lake. He just visited it. One morning, just after dawn, I took Ghost out for a quiet drift. The sun climbed slow and pale, the mist curled off the water like smoke from a resting fire. I let the engine idle, feeling the soft rumble through my boots. Halfway across the lake, I cut the power completely. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was earned. In that stillness, I thought about the years of service, the battles abroad, and the strange little war that followed me home. It wasn't about land or water, not really. It was about the same thing soldiers have fought for since the beginning of time, the right to peace, however small, however fragile. I smiled and whispered to the lake, "Guess we both made it." Now, whenever people ask if I'd ever move back to the suburbs, I just laugh. Not unless they drain this lake, I tell them, and even then I'd buy the crater. These days, my biggest complaint is that Dennis learned how to open the cooler. I'll take that kind of problem any day, because peace, when you've fought for it, isn't just silence, it's satisfaction. It's the sound of nothing going wrong. It's knowing that when the world knocks on your gate with a clipboard, you've got a lock and a boat ready to answer. And if Skylar Campbell ever decides to visit again, let's just say Ghost got a few upgrades. The cameras now recognize entitlement. As the evening sun bleeds into the horizon, I settle into my chair on the dock. A cold beer in hand, Dennis snuffling somewhere nearby. Ghost resting quiet and loyal. The air smells like pine ozone and victory. I raise my bottle to the fading light and say softly, "You don't mess with an old soldier's silence, because silence, after all, is sacred. And this lake, it finally learned who it belongs to." Sometimes peace isn't about escaping noise, it's about teaching the noise to respect boundaries. We live in a world full of people like Skylar Campbell, people who mistake control for care and community for ownership. But the truth is, simple respect isn't given by title or clipboard, it's earned by character. Benjamin Reed's story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming calm in a world that constantly tries to take it away. It's about knowing that silence isn't weakness, it's strength that's learned how to breathe. So if you've ever had a Skylar in your life, someone who pushed, prodded, or tried to claim what's yours, remember Benjamin's lesson: stand your ground, but do it smart. Defend your peace with wit, patience, and a touch of humor. Now tell me, have you ever faced a Karen or a HOA nightmare of your own? Share your story below. And if you enjoyed this wild ride, make sure to subscribe, because in this channel, justice always finds its way back to the lake.